Do we see this in children who didn't get the vaccine? Do we see the same pattern of disease? Is there a difference between these two? Is the bowel disease novel, or is it something we've seen before, like, say, Crohn's disease or food allergy? And that's the sort of the iterative nature of science, and that's the path that we were on. And when I left the Royal Free, I think we'd published something like 15 papers on this process, going through the scientific method to ask those questions. The interesting thing, and you say, where did the science come, where did it lead to? I was invited to speak to members of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, in the early years of 2000s. And they said to me, Dr. Wakefield, look, all children get MMR vaccine, only some get autism. How do you explain that? I said, well, that's medicine, okay? A lot of people smoke, only some people develop lung cancer. What are the cofactors that influence risk? We don't know, but there clearly are cofactors. I believe that age of exposure is important. The younger you get the vaccine, the greater the risk. Now, why? Why would I put forward that idea? Because measles, for example, when you get it under one, can be much more serious than if you get it later in life. And so there was a natural model for why that hypothesis should be tested. Anyway, so the CDC said, okay, and they went away and they tested that hypothesis and they found it to be exactly true. The younger you got the MMR vaccine, the significantly greater the risk of developing autism. What did they do with that information? They buried it. They destroyed the documents, they covered it up, they lied to the public, and they published something completely different, exonerating the vaccine. How do we know this? Because one of the senior authors of that study from the CDC came forward 14 years later and said, I can no longer live with this. I kept all the documents, we committed fraud, here is the truth. And so it's not my opinion or my producer's opinion, it's there. It's factual evidence presented by the CDC themselves. And that was the basis of the film Vaxxed, which you may well have seen. And so at that point, the need to destroy those documents to cover up that information, that persuaded me more than anything else that this causal association with MMR was real. And it's been buried. And millions of children have been put at risk of a serious permanent neurological disease in order to protect the vaccine program and the vaccine policy makers. Not to protect the children, but to protect those making the decisions about vaccines and those profiting from vaccines. So it's a very vexed situation. Like you say, it's extremely polarized. People have very different opinions. And fortunately now we have Bobby Kennedy Jr. in the White House as head of Health and Human Services, who will, I trust, get to the bottom of this. That's what he's vowed to do. And let's hope that he can do that.